very good evening to all of you present here. I, Dr. Krishna Sinhamahapatra, welcome you to the first lecture of the lecture series on the topic Non-Fictional Prose, conducted by BARTI Pune through its YouTube channel BARTI Online. We have met earlier as well for a few other units, and this is a fresh unit which we are taking up today. My details are on your screen. This is a live lecture. If you want to contact me, you can write your concerns in the chat box. Later on, if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me through my own channel, which is Krishna's Canvas. Now, the very first question which comes to our mind when we are saying non-fictional prose or non-fiction, the idea of what do we mean by non-fiction? So we will start with this idea of what non-fictional prose actually is. So any literary work that is based mainly on fact, even though it may contain fictional elements. What are the examples? The examples are essays or biographies which are written by different writers, by different authors. So that is what non-fictional prose talks about. So any literary work that is based mainly on fact. What is important over here? The important thing which we need to keep in mind is that it should focus on fact. Along with that, there might be some fictional elements in it, but the main purpose is to reach out the facts to the audience or the readers who are reading the texts. So, as we said, it can be an essay, it can be a biography, and the list actually goes on. It's a long list. So, when we are saying non-fiction, we should also know what is fiction, right? So, fiction refers to literature, including mysteries, science fiction, romance, fairy tales, criminal thrillers. They are all kinds of fiction. When we are saying non-fiction, it refers to books based on fact. So, it is a very broad category of literature, and the Department of Excellence has books and videos in many categories, including. So take a note of these points. What can be included in it? Number one is biography, then business, then cooking, anything related to that, health and fitness, related to pets, art, home decoration, languages, travel books or travel diaries or travelogues, books on home improvement, religion, arts, music, history, self help books, true crime, science, and comedy. So, all these categories can be actually included into our idea of non fictional prose. Now, the term non-fictional prose consists of two terms. The first term, as we have discussed, is non-fiction. When we are saying fiction, the thing which comes to our mind is that fiction is something which comes out of our mind, completely out of our mind, from our imagination. But when we are saying non-fiction, the idea which comes to our mind is that it is not something which is completely a work of our mind. Rather, it is something which is based on fact. That is something which has some semblance of truth in it. If not the entire thing, but yet it is based on the parameters of truth. So the first idea, or the top, term which non-fiction, the first part of the prose. Prose is a literary genre, we all know that, and prose can include short fiction, it can include short stories, it can include anything which is written without rhyme and in the form of a conversational tone or in the form of analysis of something, describing something. So it's a type of language that does not have an official metric structure. So what do we mean by metric structure? Metric structure is talking about the meter which is used when we are writing a poem. So the main thing which differentiates any piece of writing from it being a poetry to being a prose is the fact that a prose does not have an official metric structure. It uses the flow of speech naturally. So what does it follow? It follows exactly the way we speak. Or, for example, an incident has happened in your society or in your college or the place where you live, and you are telling that to somebody else, you're reporting that to somebody else, then the kind of reporting that you are doing, the kind of language which you're using for reporting, that comes under the ambit of the idea of a prose, as well as the general structure of the system rather than the rhythm structure as in traditional poetry. So the general structure of that particular work is important. What is the theme which is going to be kind of communicated, that is important, rather than the rhythm or the the rhythm which is followed or the kind of metric tone which is followed. So we understood now that non-fiction is something which is based on fact, and prose is something, as we know, that it's a type of language which doesn't have any official metric structure and resembles speech, resembles reporting an incident. So that is what prose talks about. So this is what the idea of non-fiction is. Now we are going to discuss certain types, as we have just quickly referred to them in the previous slide. This is what your homework will look like, which you can do for yourself, is the examples of some of the types of non-fiction which we are discussing. If you can take a note of them. So, which can be an academic paper. So, a research work which is being done by somebody and is published. That academic paper can be included into this ambit of non-fiction. Academic publishing, it's just a paper or it's from a publishing house and it gets published, but it is based on facts and it becomes an example of what? An example of non-fiction. Next is almanac. So almanacs were present earlier also, they are present now also, they are also like non-fictional prose on a certain topic. You take up a topic and you write something about that particular topic, and which gets published perhaps every year or under a particular publishing house as almanacs on that particular topic. Next comes autobiography. Autobiography, we have heard about it even before. We know about it even before, since we are preparing for our NETSET examinations. I think all of you who are here right now have appeared for the NETSET examination and are giving your best for the December net which is going to come, the set which is going to come. So it is not possible that you have not come across the term autobiography. You know what autobiography is, and hence it is auto means self and biography is the story of your life. So basically, when you are talking about yourself, your life, it is definitely not just fiction, it is based on facts, and hence that autobiography becomes an example of yourself. When we say autobiography, we remember our discussion on Dalit literature and how in Dalit literature you have seen that autobiography plays a very important role in the autobiographical mode of talking to the audience. Many of the Dalit writers who took up for discussion in India in the previous unit which we have taken up, we discussed how autobiography plays an important role in giving a kind of opening for the heart to reach out to the readers. Next is blueprint. As the term blueprint suggests, it is a kind of a plan, a description of how you are actually going to do something. And then it can be a guide, it can be a kind of design, a pattern which you have to follow, and report. There can be reports, there can be pictures, and there can be other various forms of reports as well. So when you say report or reporting, it automatically makes you think that when we are saying report, it is actually about reporting something, and it's based on what? It's based on fact. So these are basically what somebody is for. Next is creative non-fiction. So something which has been done related to non-fiction based on fact. Then some design document, there can be different kinds of design documents. You go to a designing company, you will see different books and handouts which they have related to design documents. Then based on diagrams, some diagram is described in a very normal language that comes under it. Then diary writing is a practice which is now going to be obsolete, because we hardly get time to write diary now. But still there will be some people who are writing diaries even in this hustle and bustle and the life which we are leading. And if not, you will see that there are so many diaries of important writers which has come down to us in the form of their memoir, in the form of their bent of mind in the memoir, or in the form of they sharing their own heart. So diary writing and examples of diary writing can be found in literature. And you can even see that in your family there will be people who are into writing diaries. When you're writing diaries, you actually note down the things which have happened on that particular day, and you explain that in your own language and try to stick to facts rather than fiction. Then comes dictionary. As the term dictionary suggests, a dictionary doesn't have space for fiction. Dictionary is about facts. Dictionary is about kind of explaining the things which are there, which we do not know. There can be some dictionaries based on the literary terms of Cambridge and Norton. You will see that these dictionaries do have a lot about the literary terms which get discussed. So you can actually refer to such dictionaries for further study. Then documentary film. So a documentary, the term documentary itself tells us that it is not a movie, a movie created by a producer who is documentary term itself tells us that it is about the. Next is factual television, such as television documentary. So anywhere you go, you have to take into account the term what documentary. The documentaries, the term indicates that we are talking about reality. Then encyclopedia, which gives us an idea of different things which perhaps we do not even know. So it kind of enriches our knowledge, gives us a boost to the existing knowledge. Then guides and manuals. So there can be different guides and manuals for different things. It can be, for example, in relation to traveling to some place. It can be in relation to writing research papers. It can be in relation to appearing for any competitive examinations, or in order to understand that examination, how it is conducted, where it is conducted, what are the different centers where they are conducted. Further, there are different guides and manuals. If you visit a website of any company, you will see that there are different informations which are given to you in the form of paragraphs, in the form of different pages, which also come under the ambit of non-fiction. Then handbooks are kind of given to you on any topic which is being discussed, for example, in a particular place, in a particular seminar, and you get a handbook of it, or you get some idea about it. So there also you see that it's basically the main idea is the small book of facts and information when it's actually based on a particular subject is given to you. The main purpose of the writer is to share with you some important information which that particular writer wants to share with you. Now there are some other points, some other topics which can be referred to, that is history. When we say history, history talks about facts. It is it is um, when we are saying history, it is about facts. It is about a scientific investigation of a particular situation, of a particular event which has happened in the previous times. So we are investigating that, and we are actually finding out what is the history of that place. Next is journals. We get different journals on different topics. Journals give us an idea of you know that particular topic which has been discussed in that journal. For example, there are various academic journals wherein you publish your paper, and those journals become storehouse of knowledge on a particular topic for which they are asking for submissions. Next is letter collection. Letters, the term letter is again becoming really obsolete, though still we are in the for formal purposes, formal interaction, we are using letters still, but for informal kind of connection with your friends and family, there is hardly much of use of letter. But even then, you will see that letter writing is a part of your syllabus for schools and colleges, wherein you are taught how to write proper letters, because again, letter has been one of the best ways of putting out your thoughts on that piece of paper. So letter is one such way, and then you will see that there are instances where these letters of different people have been made into books. So letters have been collected and they have been published in the form of books. For example, if you talk about Baba Sahib Ambedkar, you talk about Mahatma Gandhi and their interaction and what letters they had sent or things like that. Such like an example, such important people. If they have written down something, even though it's a letter, and there are a series of them, then you will see that they get published in the form of a book, so that other people can later on read them, read the language, read the main idea which they want to share. Then comes literary criticism. If you remember, we have already taken up this topic of literary criticism, which was the second unit which we took up after literary theory. And literary criticism talks about having different critics, their views, their ideas. We talk about Plato, we talk about Aristotle, we talk about poetics, we talk about the idea of mimesis. So, all these ideas are not fictional ideas, rather, these ideas are actually based on facts and scientific investigation which these people have done and they have written down for the future truth. Next is miscellany, wherein different kinds of information can be found. Natural history, as we were talking about history and natural history, things which are happening around us naturally. Philosophy. So, when we say philosophy of a particular thinker, talk about the social philosophy of Mahatma Phule. We talk about his idea of Satyashodak Samaj. Then that is his philosophy, his idea, his belief. And it is not a part of fiction. When he is writing something, he's writing his books. He's questioning different kind of writings by people from the upper caste, religious texts, religious books. He's questioning them. He is actually doing it through science. He is kind of, questioning them with some facts. He's proving his points. So, philosophy of any person is not based on fiction. So, it is also an example of knowledge. Then is popular science. It is related to popular science. Comes under this. Then self-help books on certain topics will kind of they get published. Okay. Then science book, the name science itself talks about the fact that it is based on facts. It's based on figures, it's based on diagrams, it's based on proper analysis which has been done, and it's not just fiction. Then the scientific papers, so when we are talking about science, then the scientific papers cannot be far. So we are referring to scientific papers. Then come the statute or various references which we find, different books, different kind of examples which we find, which define a law, which define a particular rule, will come under this idea of statute. Then comes the idea of textbook. So we have got different textbooks which include something factual. Then there are references of, as I was saying, of different dictionaries. There are different kinds of writings, and it basically, when we are talking about thesaurus, it talks about the book that consists of different words and phrases which have different similar meanings, and you refer to a thesaurus to include or to include your vocabulary. Then comes your travelogue, wherein the travelogue talks about the places which you have visited, something care about that place, and you write it down in the form of time. Now, the important travelogues, important references of philosophy, of literary criticism will come under your study for non-fiction. So when we discuss literary criticism, we have unknowingly actually touched upon quite a few topics of non-fiction when we discuss the important works of these writers. Then when we are saying dictionary, that is something which we are already using. And then when we are saying thesaurus or on an idea wherein you have got a book that contains lists of words and phrases with similar meaning. You actually happen to read this as a part of your daily life. When we are reading a novel or a fiction, we consciously read a novel or fiction, thinking that we are reading it for. Okay, audio is not clear. Fine, let me just try once to reconnect. So, can you, what, how is the voice now? Is the voice clear now? Yes, Ankush, I can see you right. Okay. So, there might be some connectivity problem from your side as well. Not really sure of it. I think Atul we have seen he is online. Anybody else online can just guide me as to if you can hear me properly or not. Yes, so is it okay now? Yes, just clear. Fine. So I'm just sharing my screen once again. The screen is visible now. Yes, so we were discussing the different types of non-fiction, and how, when we are talking about non-fiction, it is a part of our learning different things, and we keep on reading non-fiction. Yes, I think Taslim has also said that it's okay, and even Ankush has said. So we will be carrying it over, we'll be taking it forward. So we discussed these different kinds of nonfiction which are existing, and how we read, we get to know different informations through nonfiction. Now we have to understand that what is the origin of the term nonfiction, or when did it nonfiction originate? So it has been around ever since ancient civilizations needed to what record and explain their laws. Now, for example, if you are doing some study in law and you want to learn law, then how will you learn that? You will learn that through books which have been written based on law, right? You want to study science, you will have to read the body of knowledge which has been already passed down to you through ages, and hence you will have to refer to the law which has been laid down or put down in those books, right? So, when we are talking about non-fiction, perhaps it came very very early, because anything, any document which is talking about facts which have come down to us from previous times will come under the ambit of nonfiction. So here's how we define nonfiction, that is a look at its history and some of the genres most popular subgenres. So we will now deal with the understanding of its origin. How did nonfiction originate? How did it start? And what are the different sub genres? That is, for example, you have the poetry, then what kind of poetry are we talking about? The sub genre of that particular kind of writing which we are reading. So it is literature that, regardless of the subject matter, has a simple goal. We are trying to focus on this topic, so that by the time we are done with this lecture, we are very, very clear about this concept. So, it has a simple goal, that is a very clear goal, that is to provide information. So, I said that if you are not even in the habit of reading a novel, but you will always pick up something to read for getting knowledge about something, information about something, which in itself makes it an activity of reading non-fiction. So it should be based on what? Based on facts and conclusions of the author's research or expertise, as opposed to the creativity of the author's imagination. So we are not focusing on the creativity of the author's imagination. Where do we talk about this? We talk about this when we are talking about fiction. We talk about when we are talking about poetry. Then we talk about the author's creativity and his imagination. But since we are discussing non-fiction, we are concerned about the author's research or his expertise, something which he has learned, something he has done some research work on, and then when he is publishing something based on this particular research work. Now, granted, storytelling skills are required when writing a great work of nonfiction, but the content is still expected to be accurate. So, in addition to this, modern nonfiction is prose, writing that sounds like everyday speech and is not written in meter like poetry. So, the idea is that even if you have to write nonfiction, then also some amount of creativity, some amount of skills of writing should be there. Because even if you don't have any writing skills, then if you don't have any storytelling skills, even if I tell you that, oh, you were there yesterday when the accident took place, can you please share what had happened? You will even falter there. You will not be able to tell me exactly what had happened because you are not good at kind of bringing those facts together as a united whole. So storytelling skills are important, but they're not the primary thing. Some basic idea of it, how to relate or how to tell about facts, is enough to share thoughts on a particular topic. So now, as we were discussing, we are going to discuss about the history of nonfiction. So the earliest works of nonfiction can be traced back to ancient Bronze Age civilizations. So by 740 BC, ancient Akkadian literature was already producing the Babylonian Chronicles. That is a history of the lives of kings, philosophers, and the workings of the empire. In the first century AD, Rome's Pliny the Elder created the earliest recognized encyclopedia. As we are discussing, that encyclopedia is one of the types of nonfiction, right? We were also discussing how different chronicles, which talks about history, is a part of non-fiction. So the first, if it was the Babylonian Chronicles, then the Rome's Pliny the Elder created the earliest recognized encyclopedia, which is Naturalis Historia, a popular record of current day science, art, and history. So fast forward another, quite a few years, 1,100 years. What happens is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles came into the fore, which celebrates the history of England between the expulsion of the Roman Empire and the arrival of the Normans. So then we come across a reference of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. Whenever we are listening to the term chronicles are talking about history. It's talking about documentation of facts of how some ruler invaded a place and then who overtook the that power of that place, who became the king, and then how it followed, how language was influenced, how actually English came into the fore. What was the influence which kind of brought into the creation of this particular language. So through the centuries, subgenres were established. History is branched off into biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, books about the current affairs. So, as we were discussing about the concept of sub-genres some time back, we were saying that if that genre is the histories, there can be some sub-genres which come under it, like the biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, and books about current affairs. Again, science and nature writing broke away from religious texts. So the teaching guides of ancient Egypt, full of advice, on how to live a proper life led to Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac. If you remember, we were just talking about almanacs, which are record of different informations. Here is also Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac and the self-help bestsellers of today. So the self-help books which give us information. So let's take a deeper look at the modern sub-genres of non-fiction now. So these were some of the previous examples. Now we are going to see some of the common types of non-fiction in the present situation. So histories are as popular now as they were in ancient times. So today they serve the same purpose, that is to shine a light on the past and cement its importance. So a lot has been done or is getting done related to history in the present world. You see how the history books of different boards like CBSE, they are undergoing change. Then the different syllabuses of different universities like JNU or Delhi University, they are getting kind of getting changed based on the desire of the people in power, the things which they want to put light on and which they don't want to light. So because histories, they put light on the past and cement its importance. To cast the origins of our discontents by Isabel Wilkerson looks at the history of discrimination in the United States and how it provided the framework for an unseen caste system today. So this is one of the examples. Eric Larson's The Splendid and the Wheel or the Wild takes readers into the personal life of Winston Churchill as World War II rages in Europe and is a part of a long tradition of military histories. So you will see that there are different poems which are written for the war poems which have been written by the poets who have been a part of the war and have been away from their home. Similarly, there are tradition of military histories wherein you see the example here. Then, when we talk about non-fiction novels, the line between fiction and non-fiction is often blurred. As we can understand, when somebody is writing a piece of literature, it is very, very difficult to actually judge whether the elements of fiction is more or the elements of fact is more. And that is where that blurring line comes in. Or the line gets blurred and hence it becomes difficult to differentiate. So, the Roman Eclipse, a novel that includes real events and characters who are barely disguised from the real people they represent, first became popular in 1600s. It has been a particularly useful tool for authors writing semi-autobiographical novels, such as Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar, about her struggles with bipolar disorders. So, whenever you see some reference which is talking about some fact, it brings in the idea of non-fiction. So, in Cold Blood by Truman Capote marks the rise of modern true crime genre. His non-fiction novel recreates the real life circumstances around the 1959 murders of four people in the small town of Holcomb, Kansas, and includes the author's theories on the murderer's motives. Since it is based on real life circumstances, it becomes an example of non-fiction novels. We have to pay attention to that the element of fact, if it is more than the element of fiction, then automatically it becomes an example of non-fiction. In 1971, Hunter S. Thompson channeled his subjective first-person gonzo journalism style to create fear and loathing in Las Vegas. The narrative, also a Romanesque, blurs fiction with fact as it describes what does it describe a wild, law-breaking road trip to Las Vegas in the waning days of America's counterculture era. Now we have to see that in each example, what is happening is that there is reference to real facts. It is based on some real fact. particular, state, that particular of that particular community, and you're referring to that, then it becomes an example of a book which is based on facts, and hence an example of non-fiction prose or non-fiction novel as it has been written. The subgenre has exploded in popularity in recent years to include other types of media like true crime podcasts, documentaries, movies, and TV shows. So you will see that there are so many examples of documentaries, and there are different shows which are based on real life incidents of people, wherein people come to the stage and they talk about their experiences, share their experiences, which becomes a narrative of non-fiction. Then, yet the subgenre itself dates back centuries, from the topical crime pamphlets of the 1600s to the shocking penny dreadfuls read throughout 19th century England and America. In 1966, Truman Capote ushered in a new era of true crime writing with the publication of the aforementioned, that is the one which has been previously mentioned, the work which is In Cold Blood. Now, in 1979, Norman Baylor wrote or won the Pulitzer Prize for what? The Executioner's Song, a true crime novel centered on the execution of Gary Gilmore. So, see, if it is a completely fictitious, work, then we do not get these references that it's based on a particular person. You will see that in some works they actually show, when the list scrolls down of the people who are associated, the story from which it has been taken, they actually talk that it's based on true events, it's based on events which have happened in this year, in this place, which makes it more relatable as a true story. And hence, whenever it's a true story, it comes under the ambit of non-fiction. Now, other popular true crime books include Vincent Buglios's Helter Skelter, the best selling true crime book of all time, and Anne Rule's The Stranger Beside Me, about serial killer Ted Bundy. So in each one of them, you see there is reference to the people based on whom this particular story or this crime book has been written, which makes it an example of non-fiction. Then the reference of the New Atlantis, which has fired the imaginations of its readers since its original appearance in 1627, is often regarded as the apotheosis of Bacon's ideas through its depiction of an advanced scientific society. It also is read as a seminal work of science fiction. So when we were discussing about the different genres, we discussed that science books, science fiction, something related to facts, something related to proven things which you are saying that this is going to happen, or this is how it is going to, kind of work, then it becomes an example of non-fiction. So at a time when the collective endeavors of early modern researchers amounted to something less than a science or less than science, Francis Bacon's The New Atlantis helped show what wonders might be achieved by organized and methodical state sponsored scientific research. So it showed what wonders might be achieved by organized and methodical state sponsored scientific research can do. So Bacon's vision was highly prescient. Many of the scientific possibilities he sketched have since become realities. So why it is considered as a non-fiction? It's because many of the things which he has written in his book have kind of turned into realities later on, and hence bringing in the idea of realism, bringing in the idea of truth, facts, making it an example, or a kind of a near example of non-fiction. So it was also highly influential. This early modern science bears the characteristic stamp of Bacon's vision, and that some or the same influence is discernible, that is, we can find down to the present day. So even in the present day, we can get references of the things which Bacon has written. You can imagine when he has written all these things and how significant his work is. Now we will move on to the discussion of the Indian context and how this idea of non-fiction took its place in the Indian context. So in Indian English literature, as we have done English in India in the previous unit, we will be taking this up and then take up some other important works in our next the next lectures which we take on this topic. So, Indian English literature began as a byproduct of the Indo-British encounter. What do we mean by Indo-British encounter? The encounter that is coming face to face of the British education system and the Indian culture and Indian education system happened when the Britishers invaded India. They came and started ruling India, and as they were ruling, they wanted what? If you remember English in India, how we discussed, they wanted interpreters, and hence they created this class of people who could actually read and write English and who could translate things to them, be the interpreters between the Indians and the English ruling class. As a result, through these kinds of interactions, slowly and slowly, the influence of English started getting felt at various, layers and positions of the Indian culture. And today, when we are reading English, it is perhaps an example of how deeply it has rather entered into our culture, wherein the English literature, which was written by Indian writers, came across or was produced as a byproduct. The Indians first started learning English for the purpose of what? Purpose of trade and commerce. So, trade and commerce, since these Indians who wanted to expand their trade and wanted to be better in commerce and earn more money, they started learning this language on their own for their own benefit and also for the benefit of the Englishmen who wanted to continue trade and commerce here in the colony. So, expository plus prose writing, letters, and speeches were the first to be published. So, the first Indian author in English, that is Deen Muhammad, published his memoirs. Again, we were discussing that memoirs are basically things which are written from your memory and you write it down in the form of memoirs. And the Dalit women writers, they have also written various memoirs wherein they have referred to their own situations, things which we have done. So here, Deen Muhammad, he is writing the memoir, The Travels of Deen Muhammad in 1794. Since it is about the travels which he has done actually, and it is a recollection, memoir is talking about recollection. So it becomes an example of the first non-fiction from India. So expository plus prose writing, letters and speeches were the first to be published as we discussed. And then specifically, if we have to talk about one word, then it is the travels of Deen Muhammad in 1794. There have been outstanding Indian orators like Vivekananda, Tilak, Srinivasa Sastri. So they have been outstanding orators, that is, they have spoken very well. Now, Indians have published biographies, autobiographies, travelogues, and humorous sketches. So they have published what? Biographies, autobiographies, travelogues, and humorous sketches, in addition to scholarly monographs in various fields of knowledge. So, as we were saying earlier, that when we are saying, um, talking about non-fiction, then biographies and along with that autobiographies, they become important. And it kind of is an addition to the scholarly monograph, wherein monograph refers to a detailed written study of a single specialized subject or an aspect of it. So, there are series of monographs on music, and there are different references to Renaissance. So monographs are written. So Indians have published biographies, autobiographies, travelogues, humorous sketches, that is funny sketches of some real facts of real people, of real situation, of real place, as well as which, in addition to scholarly monographs in various fields of knowledge. So many of the contemporary novelists and poets have written good prose. When we are saying good prose, as we know that we were discussing that non-fiction is included in prose. So they have written different examples of good prose, but the achievements in poetry and fiction have drawn arming away from non-fiction prose writings. So it is talking about the different achievements which prose and poetry has, and how is if we are writing poetry and fiction, it becomes more popular than the non-fiction prose which is written. So it is only in 1996 that a historian, Michael H. Fisher, brought this work to light. His scholarly work, the first Indian author in English, Deen Mohammed, in India, Ireland, and England, has chronicled the life of this unknown Indian, who had, as we saw, written about the travels which he had done during his lifetime. Raja Rammohan Roy, if you remember when we did English in India, and those who have not attended the lecture can actually get back to the series which we have done, English in India, wherein we have discussed about Raja Rammohan Roy and his importance in the history of English in India. His essay, A Defense of Hindu Theism, is the first original publication in expository prose in the history of Indian writing in English. So Raja Rammohan Roy's contribution is immense, and his kind of references and his contribution cannot be uh, kind of kept out of the reading of English in India. And also, when he has written essays, they have been essays of expository prose, in the sense they have explained certain things or described certain things which he has found important. And here we see that it's about defense of the Hindu theism. So Bengalis have made an outstanding contribution to early prose writing, wherein there is reference of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, the father of Bengali novel and author of Rajmohan's Wife, which was written in 1864. So the first Indian novel in English, which was wrote, and then he wrote several essays in English. So Rajmohan's Wife is an example of the first novel, and other than that, he has written several essays. So when we are saying non-fiction, we will have to concentrate on the essays which he has written. Then Swami Vivekananda's complete works, the first volume of which appeared in 1907, consists primarily of what? Of speeches and lectures. So we saw that we were discussing that many Indians were good in speeches, giving speeches and lectures. Now these people were so good in giving speeches and delivering lectures, that their speeches and lectures are also published. If you see that in your syllabus of compulsory English in your college, there will be some examples of a speech, for example, by Swami Vivekananda, or a speech by Martin Luther King Jr., because such speeches are examples of non-fiction, wherein they are talking about reality, they are talking about the need of the time, things which need to be addressed. So he spoke of the spiritual uniqueness of India and the greatness of Hinduism, but he spoke even more forcefully about the current degradation of India, its causes, and its. So his language has an astonishing modernity about it. The idiom is so fresh, it is difficult to believe that he spoke 100 years ago. So he used simple diction and short sentences. So, so he spoke of the spiritual uniqueness of India, how India is spiritually unique, and the greatness of Hinduism. Because if you hear his speeches, he says that how India gives shelter to whoever comes to its country, and how it is a great country which he can boast of. So he spoke about the force. He spoke more forcefully about the current degradation of India, its causes and its cure. And his language has astonishing, it is strange modernity about it. The idiom is so fresh, it is difficult to believe that he spoke 100 years ago. So he spoke uh, quite early, not now. But even now, if we read his pictures, you will see that there is a quality of appealing which is there, which appeals to you even now. So he used one of the reasons being simple diction and short sentences. So instead of using very difficult and very confusing sentences, he has used short sentences and simple diction to reach out to people so that people can listen to him. Then Rabindranath Tagore is the brightest star in the firmament of Bengali literature and culture. He was a poet, playwright, and novelist who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1913. He composed hundreds of songs and was also a painter of merit. His autobiographical works in Bengali, which is My Boyhood Days, which we need to take a note of since we are discussing non-fiction over here. So, My Boyhood Days and Reminiscences are among his early works, which are autobiographical in nature. Since we are saying autobiographical, it becomes non-fiction. So, Tagore's prose writing in English were primarily in the form of lectures. Though his letter to Mahatma Gandhi, see, we were discussing letters, how letters are also examples of non-fictional study. So, though his letter to Mahatma Gandhi, the Great Sentinel, is an outstanding composition upholding the values of humanism in the midst of political turmoil. So we see that his autobiographical reference, which is My Boyhood Days and Reminiscences, they are among his early works which come under the ambit of non-fiction. Similarly, his prose writings in English, which were primarily lectures, and even his letter to Mahatma Gandhi, which comes under the Great Sentinel, is an outstanding composition upholding the values of humanism in the midst of political turmoil. So we see there is a message, a strong message, which his prose writings had, which his writer had. Then Sadhana, his first prose work in English, is based on lectures he gave on Indian philosophy. If you remember, we discussed philosophy also. How philosophy is a part of non-fiction. So, his first prose work in English is based on lectures he gave on Indian philosophy at Harvard University. So, of his many collections of lectures, nationalism is the most relevant one. So, if we talk about nationalism, wherein we get idea of Tagore's views of nationalism, is very, very important even today. So it is important and relevant example. But all these names which we just took, they are all part of non-fiction because they are based on facts, they are based on philosophy, they are based on autobiographical elements, and they are based on lectures or they are letters to real people like Mahatma Gandhi. So they become examples of non-fictional prose. Hence, Sri Aurobindo's essays can be divided into three broad categories, which is religion, social issues, and literary criticism. So you can remember we discussed these points that religion, social issues, and literary criticism, they come under the ambit of non-fiction. So his most famous works in the field of religion and spirituality are The Life Divine, The Synthesis of Yoga, and Heraclitus, a comparative study of Greek philosophy and Vedantic thought. So his idea of the divine, his idea of philosophy and Vedantic thought comes in through his essays, through his works, which are based on the topics of religion and spirituality. So many of his essays on social issues first appeared in Arya, a monthly he founded in 1914. The books on social and cultural issues include The Renaissance in India and The Seventh Foundations of Indian Culture. So he has written on various social issues which first appear and various not only social but also cultural issues which have been important over the time, and he has written about the renaissance which India was actually going through, was seen during this period, and the foundations of Indian culture. So his literary criticism appears in this particular book. The literature poetry or appears in the literature, it appears in poetry and in letters. So, not only one, but there are very many examples of them. So, his critical approach is a synthesis of the best Western and Sanskrit traditions of aesthetics, that is, beauty, of the idea of life. So, he is trying to bring about a synthesis, if you can see the names like synthesis of yoga, Heraclitus, which is a comparative study of Greek philosophy and Vedantic thought. So he is bringing in some kind of synthesis of these two ideas. So the early decades of 20th century witnessed Indians using English very effectively in public speeches. So when are we talking about? We are talking about early decades of 20th century, which witnessed or which saw Indians using English very effectively in public speeches. So nationalist leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and Mahadev Govind Ranade were great orators. And as I am saying, that the speeches which they gave were so laden with knowledge and different facts and realities of life that those speeches could be published in the form of books, in the form of reading materials. So perhaps the greatest orators of the period was B.S. Srinivasa Sastri, a leader of the moderates. He was known as the silver-tongued orator of the empire. He also wrote a number of biographies, including Life and Times of Firoz Shah Mehta and My Master Gokhale. Sarojini Naidu, we have discussed about Sarojini Naidu when we were discussing about English in India. How she's better known for her poetry, actually also showed her mastery of prose in her speeches. We've already discussed that the speeches were very common. People used to, it was a mode of entertainment. It was a mode, now we see podcasts, we see people giving speeches on television, and we hear them, we listen to them. But during that time, it was the age of real speeches when people used to go and visit, wherein some important personality used to come to their area, and hence these people also used to be really prepared with their speeches, because that was the only way to reach out to people other than some handouts and newspapers, or magazines rather, which were there. So another leader of the Gandhian era, Sarojini Naidu, is also known for her speeches. Now see, Raja Gopalacharya Rajaji was an eloquent speaker. His simple prose versions of Ramayana and Mahabharata also reveal his mastery of English. However, the most important leader and thinker of the era was Mahatma Gandhi, after whom this period has been named. So, Mahatma Gandhi and Gandhiji's speeches and his dialogues with people and important leaders of the time and the Britishers, all these things were very, very important. In terms of literary merit, Jawaharlal Nehru was the greatest writer of this period, and most critics agree that his autobiography is the best work in the genre. So, his autobiography is another example of what? Of non-fiction. Now, there are some references to post-independence fiction, or post-independence prose. So, S. Radhakrishnan taught philosophy at leading universities in India and abroad, and rose to be the president of India. So, he was a prolific writer, that is a very good writer, whose works include Indian philosophy in 2 volumes, The Hindu View of Life, The Principal Upanishads, which were written, as you can see, in the years 1923, 27, then 1926, 1953. Then Khushwant Singh, better known as novelist and journalist, has credit of writing the standard scholarly work on his community, that is the people of his community, and the beliefs and the laws of his community. Then the leading critics in the field of English literature, that is K.R. Srinivas Iyengar, C.D. Narasimha, and M.K. Nayak, we have their books which we read, wherein they have put in facts and ideas of the time period which they have covered in their book. Then Meenakshi Mukherjee is another important critic, who's the twice born fiction, is devoted to Indian English fiction in realism and reality. So she studies the growth of the novel in Indian languages. And whenever we are talking about study, it is actually an analysis, a scientific study wherein references are given. It's not about fiction, it is not about imagination, it is actually about facts. And at the beginning, we have discussed that when we are saying non-fiction, we are talking about facts. So, writer of the post-independence era who resembles Chaudhary is in dedicating himself to non-fictional writing is Ved Mehta, author of 18 books, of which just one, Delinquent Chacha, is a novel. So, other than that, he has written other books which come under non-fiction. Then R.K. Lakshman's India's best cartoonist has published his autobiography termed The Tunnel of Time. So many established novelists have published their autobiographies, like Nantara Segal's Prison and Chocolate Cake, which appeared before her novels, was followed by From Fear set free. So these are certain works which we have just discussed, and after this, we will be discussing some other genres like travelogues and the personal essays, which have come under the ambit of fiction and how they have come under the ambit we are going to discuss in the upcoming lecture. So, any questions, anything you want to put, you can put up in the chat box, wherein we have discussed the origin, we have discussed the types of non-fiction, how the idea of non-fiction came into place, what were the terms which comes out, or how did it come into configuration, what kind of non-fictions are there, what are the genres, what are the subgenres, and right from its origin till the Indian context, how it originated, what are the examples we have discussed in today's lecture. Any doubts from here, you can actually put it in the chat box. If not, then we will be done for the day. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining in. Have a great day ahead. See you in the lecture, which is going to be shared in the upcoming days. Okay. So thank you so much.